That was okay, but we can do better, right? Hello! Hello! That was excellent. My name is Katie, and your name is? It is great to meet you. I am a lifelong performer, writer, troublemaker. Since I was a child, I have believed that speaking up, speaking out, speaking together can transform the world. How we speak is how we think, is how we live, and speaking changes minds, which changes everything. So this is my bias. This is the conviction that has fueled all of my pursuits toward advocacy and creativity, which eventually led me to the poetry slam community. Of course. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a poetry slam is a competitive poetry reading. It was invented in the early 1980s in Chicago by a construction worker named Mark Smith. I know, so what? Those of you who have been to poetry slams are like, she just made a great joke. I did. I just made a great joke. So what? Well, today, about 20-odd years later, the Slam family, as we sometimes call each other, is a global network of outspoken, opinionated people who arguably use language differently than almost everybody else. Because let's face it, how many of us are personally invested in devoting our lives to poetry? Too few. I know, too few. Well, the most valuable lesson the Poetry Slam has taught me is how an audience will listen to creative language differently than almost anything else. It is astonishing what a performer can tell an audience. That level of trust within that exchange, that communion, is enormous. So one form or option or device that's available in some poetry slams is what's known as the group piece, wherein multiple people perform the same piece, the same poem, together at the same time. I've also heard it called choral reading, if that strikes, bells for any of you. So maybe several people will speak the same words simultaneously, or maybe several people will speak different words simultaneously, or maybe someone will speak and someone will sing, or maybe someone will speak and then someone will sing. Lots of options in the group piece. And this is what caught my heart, right? I loved group pieces. I still love group pieces, and some of it is the oral experience, certainly, and some of it is that technical prowess, but also multiple voices can change what words mean. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So back in 2008, I had this idea for this full-length group piece, and that project eventually clocked in at about 40 minutes. In comparison to a group piece in a poetry slam, or any piece in a poetry slam, which is going to be 3 minutes or less, this is an idea for a 40-minute group piece. And so I put together this troupe of brilliant artists who were committed to startling multi-voice performance, and we called ourselves the Epicene Furies. And many people have been Furies throughout the years, and the 4 Furies who join me today are Shannon Jaxies, Zadika Poindexter, Crystalline Buskell, and Dulcie Mueller. They are fabulous human beings. And they have agreed to help me demonstrate for you this multi-voice performance thing that I go on and on and on and on about. Okay? So let's start with the basics. As you might imagine, having multiple people perform a single work gives us a lot of opportunities to craft some technical skills. For instance, the form of a poem, the structure of a poem, especially when we're working within form. Let's take haiku, for example. A haiku is a highly structured form of poetry. You've got a title, you've got 3 lines, you've got 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, 5 syllables in the third line. Highly structured form, okay? But if you have 4 voices performing one haiku, those voices can help emphasize or underscore that structure. For instance, haiku to fill the vacancies. Release the sparrow wrapped in your ribs. He will steal away with your tears. All right? So we've got title, we've got line, line, line. We've got that structure emphasized by many people speaking at the same time. All right? So let's go on to another technical skill that maybe obviously can be manipulated by many voices on a stage speaking at once, and that's volume. You know, you've got a lot of people, you've got a lot of voices, you've got a lot of noise that you can make. And by being louder or by being quieter, you can build and you can release tension, which is going to enhance the experience of that piece. And to demonstrate a little bit of that volume control, 4 of us are going to perform an excerpt from a poem of mine called "This is a Test of the Emergency." I've run the risk of eliciting sympathy based solely on well-rewritten accounts of my history, so let me speak now, unrepentantly, of only the truth, and not of its whole, and of it not nearly the worst. Okay, did you hear that? We've got many voices, we've got fewer voices, we've got to build, we've got to release. But as we are taking these technical skills and as we are using them to arrange or manipulate the words that we're speaking, notice that we are also complicating the speaker. All right? In this last poem, it's written in singular first person. The speaker is I, and yet we've got multiple people speaking that I simultaneously at the same time, which changes how we understand the story. It changes what those words mean. I'm going to come back to that. Let me show you something else that's pretty cool. Multiple voices can accentuate rhythms and sounds that are in creative language that maybe a single speaker isn't able to express on her own. And to demonstrate that, 4 of us are going to perform an excerpt from my MFA thesis that is titled "Girl on Girl Live Action." I know. When I tried to write sentences,
my lungs spasm.
bark sandpaper gnats into the oily sky.
My right radius and ulna shivered.
My femurs thrum.
Skeleton throbs.
Skin buzzes. Hums. Taut. All right? Did you hear that? Oh, you can clap. That's cool. All right. Applause. But so we have rhythm being accentuated. We've got some sound play going on there that I couldn't speak on my own. We even have some volume stuff happening and a little bit of structure support, although we're dealing with free verse, so there's not a lot of prescribed structure to that bit of writing. But also, and again, those multiple voices change what that I means. We're changing what those words mean. We're making what's happening on this stage kind of impossible, and yet, at the same time, possible. So this semi-impossibility is powerful, and it can be deliberately used to effect. And to show you that, we're going to go back to that initial project that I was telling you about in 2008. The Epicene Furies performed a piece that we called Conspiring Texts, which was comprised primarily of the language from 2 of Barack Obama's campaign speeches, his Yes We Can speech, and then his A More Perfect Union speech, which was more commonly known as his race speech. Okay? So I took language from these speeches and I pulled them apart and I mashed them together in interesting and startling ways, and then I arranged all that language for 5 voices, 5 women, to perform together. And the excerpt that we are going to perform for you right now to demonstrate impossibility is 3 voices. All right? I am the son of a black man from Kenya.
Whether we are rich or poor,
And a white woman from Kansas.
black or white,
I was raised with the help of a white grandfather.
Who survived the depression to serve in Patton's army during World War II.
Latino or Asian.
And a white grandmother who worked on a bomber assembly line at Fort Leavenworth while he was overseas.
Whether we hail from Iowa or New Hampshire.
I've gone to some of the best schools in America and lived in one of the world's poorest nations.
Nevada or South Carolina.
I am married to a black American who carries within her the blood of slaves and slave owners, an inheritance we pass on to our two precious daughters.
We are ready to take this country in a fundamentally new direction.
I have brothers,
Sisters,
nieces,
nephews,
uncles
and cousins
of every race and every hue scattered across 3 continents. That is what is happening in America right now. All right? You hear that? The tension between the words that are being spoken and the bodies that are doing that speaking creates this weird plurality / surreality / universality. Okay? So one last really lightning flash, super quick example. In one of these speeches, at the beginning of one of his promises, Obama began one of his sentences with the memorable clause, "When I am president," which is a very different thing for a black man in America to say than, say, a 5-year-old kindergartner in America to say, "When I am president." Then, for 5 women of indeterminate age or ancestry to say, "When I am president." We are transforming this performance into a conversation about what is impossible, which is another way of saying what is possible. I can be president, we can be president, your mom can be president, everybody's mom can be president, everybody can be president. What does president even mean anymore? What is power if it is something we can all achieve together? I can tell you, after Epicene Furies projects, we get a lot of Me Too stories. Last year, the Furies performed a show that was called Compassion that was made up mostly of first-person abortion narratives, so mostly women's stories. And afterwards, you should have heard the audience Me Too. The men in the audience were telling Me Too stories. So everybody's telling their stories, and everybody's telling everybody else's stories because that's what Me Too means. For some reason, probably for many reasons, multi-voice performance inspires within humans this empathy that is unlike anything I have previously or subsequently seen. And this empathy seems to fulfill some profound need to feel heard and unalone. It's magic. And it happens. I have been there. I have seen it. It is more than what is possible. It is already true. Thank you.